Learning Planet Institute.
Welcome to R&D Unplugged, a podcast from the Learning Planet Institute dedicated to discussing with our researchers on the impact of their work in a simple way. My name is Annalena and I am your host today. Today's guest is Manon Sala. She is a PhD student in Sociology and Learning Sciences at the FIRE Doctoral School here at the Learning Planet Institute. She's also the founder of the podcast Nouvelle Conscience, in which she shares her research on global ecology and education. Welcome, Manon.
Hello, thank you very much, Annalena.
We are happy to have you here. Your research is focusing on the institutionalization of ecological and social transition pedagogies in higher education in France. You aim to highlight the connection between the structural implementation of these pedagogies in French universities and the types of psychosocial competencies students develop, all within this framework of national governmental recommendations. Wow, this sounds really complex. So before we dive deeper into this, let me start with a more easy and maybe less conventional question. If your research had a theme song, what would it be and why?
Really nice question to begin the conversation. If I had to choose one theme song, I think I would choose Don't Stop Believing.
Don't stop believing. Hold on to that feeling.
Because it's something about lack of hope, eco-anxiety that it's really present in the student's life and in the university in general. And I wish that this song is here to keep the motivation ahead and to pursue, to look after what can come next and look in the future in a better way.
Wow, I love that song. I think a great one we should all listen more to, just motivate ourselves. So to get more into your research and actually the motivation behind it, let me ask the question, what actually inspired you to pursue this particular research topic?
Indeed, I think it began a long time ago when I was 8 years old. I had an organization with my friends where we used to go in the classroom and to sensibilize children about climate change, the loss of biodiversity. And I think that since then, I never stopped my commitment in a youth organization, linking the responsibility of education to speak about a global crisis. So for me, it was quite natural to follow in this path. And why I focused on the topic of higher education is because I don't know really why and when did it happen, but I felt that there were something possible and something new in this institutional process because higher education is quite an hybrid place where teachers are quite free, but at the same time they have lots of pressure and constraints, limitations upon them. And what I really like with this topic is that I think they have a huge responsibility as researchers at the same time because they have the power to influence policies, to counsel, to be really at the bridge between the education place but also the society itself. But we don't really I don't necessarily identify this bridge in secondary education, for instance, or in primary school. I think it's really specific to educators in higher education because they are also researchers.
Okay, I see there's a lot of passion behind
Yes,
your research. You already mentioned your early involvement in climate change education or also teaching about biodiversity. So you mentioning these global crisis we are currently facing. So how does actually your research contribute to the issues that the world is facing nowadays?
The main aspect of my research is how to implement ecological transitions in French curricula at the university level. So it's totally related to the global crisis because it includes both the life sciences part, but also the social aspect of those crises and a political response to really include the interconnection of those challenges. So it's really the core aspect of my research project in the way it deals with these topics and also in the way it includes other philosophical patterns to consider the place of human beings and the responsibility within those crises.
Okay. You mentioned that it's about implementing also the global ecology to the curriculum. Can you maybe elaborate on that, how this works through the research?
Indeed, I think there are different ways to tackle that. There is more the institutional part. If you listen to the RDM plug number 7, the talk we had this morning, I introduced a bit about the institutional framework with a report Jouzel in the case of higher education in France. So there are all these text recommendations published by ministries and the institutions, but also there is all the pedagogical aspects, and here is more about education itself, on how teachers, educators adapt those challenges, those effects on the students and those topics to really touch the emotions of the students, but also a feeling of agentivity and finally a belonging to democracy, and why not an ecological democracy. So here is about pedagogy, but also reglementation. And finally, the red line would be what is the responsibility of education to consider that.
Okay. You described that actually you include life sciences, social sciences, but also even a bit of political sciences. Why did you choose to take such an interdisciplinary approach for this research question?
Yes. Indeed, I felt really lucky when I was admitted to the FIRE Doctoral School, because it was the meeting of my beloved disciplines, I could say. Indeed, I was graduated in sociology, and I always loved doing education and education sciences, though my research is based on these two disciplines. And here, I think that we cannot disconnect education from politics, because we are training citizens, we are training representatives and future actors in real life. So here is more a pragmatist approach of education, and according to me, linking those two aspects is quite natural, and it should be like that. And also it's also linked to my background finally.
Okay. Yeah, like the you're mentioning of retraining citizens or the future actors. I think it's exactly what education's supposed to do, and it's a big challenge we are facing, definitely. To get a bit more into the research itself, now I would be interested in what were actually some key findings of your research. What are some insights? And was there maybe also something that was surprising you?
Yes, thank you very much for this question, Annalena. I think there is first an element of methodology, because when I decided to begin this research, I was only focusing on the learning space as a classroom. So what is happening during the classroom, the resonance between the teacher and the students and the pedagogical features. And finally, what I began to see is that this classroom is not isolated from the whole institutional aspects, the whole learning community. So here I consider the teaching of the transitions not only in the classroom place, but in the learning community, including the institutions, the departments, students' clubs. But here they were more like a cultural action, interaction between different actors, and it's finally putting the focus not only in the teaching process, but also in all the conditions that lead to this teaching process. Because educators are facing some lot of pressure. There are structural constraints that limit them in terms of freedom, of time they can get trained or they can organize their pedagogy. And when they are in the classroom, they are not disconnected from all the global context, like ecological, political context, but also they are not disconnected from the institutional context that condition their behavior, their attitude. Finally, the care they can implement or not in their classroom.
Yeah, as a teacher myself, I know the constraints that you also have in a classroom that can be given to you by an institution. So what would interest me based on your research, did you find out how this could be improved, how these conditions in the learning process could be improved for teachers and educators?
I think there are different levels. The first is to really create a feeling of belonging to a specific institution and to look everyone in the same direction. That doesn't mean that we have to teach just the same way, the same disciplines, but really consider the learning community being in a bigger project purpose that condition all the decisions made at every level. So here is more a partnerships situation, both within the institution itself, but also within all the economical and political actors that are surrounded and conditioning the institutional processes in terms of resources, in terms of events, communities, opportunities for students when they finish the school. So here is the first lever to really create and establish institutional projects and acculturation. And also, if I have to mention another one, it would be for teachers to be helped to have more time, less pressure, but also to have more assistance to do all the administrative parts, all the actions, all the missions that sometimes defocalize them from research and from teaching, because there is this striking number of one teacher for 250 students as an average in higher education in France. So here, with this number, we can see that you cannot spend a quality amount of time for 250 students. So here care is really missing because they don't have all the structural conditions to really focus on what matters, and what matters depend on the institutions itself, but also from those teachers, but they sometimes don't have the choice to really concentrate on what really matters for them and for the students.
Yeah, this number is shocking. How can you really offer individual learning path, individual help if you're responsible for so many students? So
Exactly.
yeah, that makes teaching even harder.
Yes.
We already went a bit into actually how does your research can be implemented in the real life. What does it mean actually for the teachers? So my next question is, how do you make the bridge between your research and life? We already kind of started discussing that. And maybe do you have any anecdote or story where your research directly impacted or changed maybe someone's life?
Oh, thank you. To respond to the first part of your question, I think that until I begin my PhD, what I really wanted is not to be isolated. And I always wanted to create bridges with educators out of the university. And also I am really attached to the social mission of research, to really goes out of these small worlds of researchers. So what I did is that I used my podcast to finally share my research background. So when I found a good author, a scientist where I consider that his or her work was wonderful, I invited him or her in my podcast. So it was the first way to open this space with a real, not simplest way, but more accessible sharing of research. Also, I try to be part of spaces that are out of the university. For instance, festivals. I was in a festival in Alsace at the beginning of the year. I also was part at the learning show in Rennes. This is a big event for learners and educators around technologies. So whenever I can go and share the research out of the academic world, I go. And I have also written a book that will be published in January. And I hope this book will also be an open door to all those topics. Here is really simplified, but it will be also with drawings. So I hope it will be also another way to create those bridges. And And concerning the second part about the impact of my research on real world, I have one in mind is that I conducted interviews with students I taught to last year in Montpellier. And the result of my study, the analysis, was shown to the coordinator, the teacher coordination of the option, and also was led to the president of the university. And there were a lot of discussions about how to implement new pedagogies that include more psychosocial competencies in this option. And I had some teachers who told me that this study could really influenced the way they used to teach, because they were quite afraid about trying new things and they didn't want to be strange or to go out of the strict guidelines, the typical way to teach. And for me, it was a real chance. I felt really lucky and a real honor that this small research at a really small place could influence few teachers in this option.
This is impressive, Manon, to have such an influence and such an impact already so early in your PhD time, actually, because you're only in your second year.
Yes.
I think I just wrote and noted some things you just participated in, and this is really impressive. And I like that you really try to, make research accessible. This is why this podcast actually developed together with the talk to show what research can do to everyone's life. So thank you for working on that, and I'm happy even more that to have you here. Just one question. You said that you really try also to communicate your work outside of the academic world. Why do you think is it important, especially that your topic is in higher education?
Because I think that the vocabulary of researchers, the lexical field, is quite complicated. Is lots of concepts, lots of conceptualization. And when I am asking myself at the end of the day if I feel that I did something not important but useful, I really want to feel that I am part of a bigger story that can include a lot of actors and be part of a bigger vision that serves the world for more interdependency, more sensitivity in a modern culture that is really rational and sometimes really accelerated and violent in a way. I think educators are most of the time not researchers. Sometimes they are practitioners. They are working with different types of levels of ages. You can do education everywhere in different topics using different tools. And what I want is that finally all the educators can find something that could be relevant to their specific contexts. And the research part really help when it comes to structural decisions with political actors, because there they need numbers, they need proofs. But when we think about all the other grassroots, finally, field or context, people don't speak the research vocabulary, the research language. And finally, it's about the question, who do you want to serve, to work with, which story you want to be part of. And me, I really want to be with the educator, but at the same time with those who can decide, because they can help the educators. So, and this is also something that I want to show in my thesis, that the researchers are this middle ground, creative middle ground that I mentioned this morning, because they have this agility to conciliate different words and different ways to be located in this world.
Nice. This, I think, sums really up the importance of research, but also how important it is to make it accessible.
Mm-hmm.
And I really like when you say this research language, because it is our own language and it's hard to sometimes translate that to actually people who are supposed to help or to be helped with this research. I just know that being part of a bigger story, I think this is just really inspiring and a really beautiful vision. It brings me to my last question, actually. Let's pretend I'm 20 years old again. I want to change the world to the better. Why should I engage now in research? And why should I choose your specific research topic?
Wow. I think that everyone is a researcher. And I like the image, the metaphor of François Tadei, who consider every babies as researchers themselves because they are always trying and failing, trying and trying again. So when you try something and you don't know the responses, yes, you are a researcher. And that's what is amazing, is that finally there is no gap between finally the research process and the real life process, because when you're doing a new recipe for a meal, you are doing a type of research. You are trying to find your specific ingredients. What I can say to people is that yes, there are not only one way to do research. You can also find a sense for your life, for your future. The most important for me is to research what you're really good at and to which community you want to be part to, because the most important is not to stay alone, but really to be gathered with people who will support your intuitions, your ideas, your generosity to serve the world. So let's be a researcher to the parts we want to nourish, and not necessarily in the academic sphere, because I have chosen this sphere, but not everyone should be in this area, and it's okay, and it's better. And concerning this research topic, mine, I think that no one could do it, because doing research is so personal, and I think you have to be really passionate about your research topic. So I don't think there will be a specific need to do this research project, but more to do research about what you love, what you feel you can be good at. But this one, it remember me a sentence. I don't remember the author, but the sentence is, everyone is already taken, so don't force yourself to be like the others. So this research project is already taken. So now it's open to create your own vision, your own reflection. And of course, I will be very happy to help with this research project.
I'm a bit speechless. I think it's really crazy how much passion sparks out of you when you talk about the research, and also that everyone should find the individual interest in that. So I think this is a great message. So everyone who wants to start research, find your niche, find what you're really passionate about, and get started.
Exactly.
That brings us to the end of today's episode of the R&D Unplugged podcast. I am your host, Annalena Neurohr. A heartfelt thank you to our guest, Manon Sala, for sharing her valuable insights and expertise. And a big thank you to all our listeners for tuning in today. R&D Unplugged is a Learning Planet Institute podcast. This episode was produced by Annalena Neurohr and Shahab Nastar, with recording by Edouard Picard and editing by Jean-Marc Savin. Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast so you never miss a new episode. You can find all of our podcasts and further information about all our activities on our website at learningplanetinstitute.org/podcasts. Manon, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Annalena. And thank you, Edouard.
Thanks for joining us, you all, and we will see you in the next episode.
Learning Planet Institute.